Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Two Beards, Two Hats, Two Hoodies. I'm your host, Jason, and today with me is Ryan Florence. Ryan, how you doing?
I am doing well. I'm a little stuffy. My kids went back to school, so everyone's sick now, right?
Yeah, I think that's the way it goes. Jeez. Well, yeah, I'm thrilled to have you back on the show. I think this is going to be a whole lot of fun. For folks who maybe aren't familiar with your work, do you want to give us a bit of a background before we jump in?
Sure. For this live stream, React Router. So created it with my partner Michael Jackson, business partner, and 8 years ago. I can't believe we've been working on that thing for almost a decade.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, if you're watching this show, you've probably heard of React Router, so we can. I'll just leave it at that, I guess.
And then I think, it's safe to assume that people have probably come across your work in the past, but so you created React Router. I mean, you've been all over the place, so maybe even just like a super high level of your kind of path to today would be super useful.
Okay, sure, yeah. I started web dev when web dev started. Because I'm 41, I think. Maybe I'm 42. I'd have to do the math. And I honestly, at this moment, don't know. I was born in 81, so maybe some in the comments can tell me how old I am in May. So that's relevant too. Anyway, so the internet comes out, and my dad invests in an ISP. You remember those?
Yeah.
Like you had to like plug into the phone line and like call up and like doing all the modem noises. Anyway, and so I got into web dev. Back then you just had your own FTP server and you could just stick files there and you had a website. And that's when I got started, just HTML and CGI bin. And then I remember when CSS was invented.
Yep.
And started using CSS. And then I remember when JavaScript and JavaScript showed up on the scene. And then dynamic HTML, and then the Ajax generation. Honestly, I kind of hit like my band. I started making websites for my punk rock band, and that's why I got into it. And the popular bands in Utah would let me play shows with them if I promised to build them a website. So that's how we got shows. And then I didn't do a whole lot with web development for a couple of years. Did some volunteer work for my church for a couple of years. And then came back and then got into college and didn't do a whole lot. And then got married, and my wife needed either a portfolio. She was studying photography, so she needed a portfolio. And we could either print one, and that was going to be like $300, and we were just super poor college kids, so that wasn't going to happen. But the teacher was like, you could also make a website if you know how. And so my wife's like, didn't you know how to make websites when you were a kid? I was like, oh, crap. Kind of. So I got back into it, and she'd go to websites on other people's portfolios and be like, hey, can you make it change colors when they switch pictures? And I'm like, no, I don't know how to do that. and then like the next day I'm like, hey, come look at your website. Look what I did. So I really got into JavaScript and like really dynamic websites in the early 2000s. And that was the Scriptaculous, Prototype, MooTools, jQuery era. So that's when I really like cut my teeth in JavaScript. And then after that, did some Backbone and jQuery together, lots of require.js stuff, and then got into Ember. Loved Ember. That's where we learned nested routing in React Router. If you read through our features page on the React Router doc site, you'll see us have a whole paragraph that's like talking about how Ember taught us about these nested routes and how cool they are. And then React hit the scene, and I jumped on the wagon with everybody else, and here we are. And then built Remix.
And then built just that little old thing.
That little old thing. Been working on that for a couple of years, and it had some really cool data abstractions, which I guess brings us to today, where we discovered some cool stuff in Remix. Once we had a server, and we could start thinking about like, all right, we got a server, what can we do here with our router? And got data loading, and then we figured out, oh shoot, we can do mutations as well with forms, just like old school web. I missed the part. I did a bunch of PHP and Rails and stuff too. I kind of skipped the server side of my career, but did a lot of that too. And then we brought it all over to React Router.
Yeah.
Which is,
Okay.
I think why we're in this episode today. We were like, how can we did all this data stuff. Can this fit in React Router just standalone? And we discovered, yeah, it totally can. And it worked out really well.
So this is actually, I'm really curious about this because it is a, when I read about this, like you announced 6.4 and you kind of teased at things like mutations and data loaders. And then you hit me up and you said, let's do an episode. So I said, okay, I'm not going to read anything. So I've done no research. So all I have is questions. And one of the things that kind of struck me was when you start talking about like data loaders and things, my experience with React Router has always been that it is it's this very specific routing paradigm where I'm kind of setting up a route provider, and then I define my, this route serves me this component, right? And that's the way that I've always kind of thought about routing. And I have my guards, like I can check whether or not somebody's logged in and then bounce them to another route or something. But when I started thinking about the data loading and the mutations and some of the other pieces that you were talking about, in my head, I was like, does that mean that it's like, did the whole paradigm change? Or so I guess as you're thinking about these, what to you, like how does it fit into the mental model of somebody like me who remembers, React Router 4 and like Reach Router and is now coming to 6.4?
Yeah, that is a great question. Because it was basically, here's a URL, match it to a hierarchy of components, and then render them.
Right.
Click a link, change the URL, change the components. And then data and everything else, that was like, that's irrelevant. That's all just side effects of stuff, right? If you go back one version to V3 in React Router, we had a hook called onEnter. And if you go to V1, it was called on transition to or will transition to or something like that. But the first versions of React Router actually had this concept in them.
Oh, interesting.
Of on enter, I want to do something, and let's wait for that enter hook to finish before we move on. Ember's router has this too. I haven't used Ember in a very long time, but the Ember that I used had a model hook, and it did the same similar thing. But if you go back, like forget client-side routing, because this is a question we get all the time, is like, criticism sometimes is like, I don't know why your client-side router has to get involved with data and forms and all that kind of stuff. If you just think about a server router, right? Rails, Laravel, Express, your API routes in any framework, there is a router there,
right,
that handles post requests. A post request is just a form submission, or a form submission is just a post request. So if you're building an Express app, you're saying app.get login, right? And you render a login page. There's also data loading there. You need to like load, maybe the user's already here and let's redirect them, right? So like if you just take JavaScript out of the equation, forget about everything you think, everything you know about React Router in the past, and just think about routers on the web in general. It's actually a lot more like that now. When you go to the login page, you want to maybe load a user, and if they're there, redirect them somewhere else. Otherwise, you're going to render the component. They're going to post to like, there's a form, right? And they're going to submit it, and it's going to go to somewhere like create session. And what the browser does there is it will actually serialize the form that the user like filled out into a string, or a thing called multi-part form data for like file uploads and stuff. But it basically serializes whatever's in the form, that DOM state, makes a request, this is all just the browser, and then sends it off to the server. And then Express or Rails or whatever can pull that off of the request, do something with the database, and then send back a new response or redirect them to another page. So if you want to get the mental model right now with React Router, just think of a server router. It's got all the same pieces as one of those.
Okay.
But when it's in the browser, now it has a whole bunch of stuff for like the pending states and everything else. And we'll probably get more into that as we get through. But
sure,
that's the model. You can keep using it the way that it always has worked as well. Like this isn't it's a dot version, right? It's 6.3 to 6.4.
Right. So it's not a breaking change.
It's not a breaking change. There's just kind of a new mode almost. You can think about it as like V7, but we actually put the APIs in V6 so that you can just incrementally migrate to it if you want to.
But I think, I mean, this is something that I do think, in general, the React community does really well is thinking about not breaking backward compatibility. And I think, you know, it's maybe a reaction to the like a lot of people moved to React after the Angular to Angular 2 split.
That's probably
they were like, maybe let's never do that again. But what I have really liked is that, you know, typically speaking, if I'm using a library, except in rare cases, you can kind of just never update your code again, but continue to update the dependencies, and you're probably going to be fine, right? At least with the major libraries.
With the runtime stuff, the build, the world of bundlers in the React ecosystem, those things, you fire those up and they sometimes explode in your face. But yeah, the actual, like,
Fair.
if you can get your bundler to compile what you're trying to do, yeah, in general, the React world at runtime does a great job of that. It's hard. It
really is, yeah.
It is way harder to build a library that way. But I think it's ultimately worth it, especially with like React Router has so many users. I don't think, like, we did a big breaking change from V3 to V4. But I don't think we could. I just don't want to do that to people with just how many people use it at this point.
Yeah, and it also creates that, like, you know, that tectonic shift, right? I feel like when Webpack did its last big major breaking change, that was kind of like a lot of people took that as the opportunity. Well, I got to migrate anyways. I might as well migrate to Vite or ESBuild or whatever the thing is, right? And so that backward compatibility is also such a good way to keep people, you know, on the tool. If it's not, it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? But well, if it's broke,
we even shipped a backwards compatibility package for V4 to V5 now, or sorry, V5 to V6.
Nice.
Theoretically, you can bring in that backwards compat layer and continue to run. You basically got to run both APIs together. And I know some people are using it, and it mostly works pretty well. So even when we had our big breaking change, we went back and like kind of backfilled, like, okay, we want to help people get from V5 to V6, and then we want to help them get from V6.3 to 6.4 with this data stuff. And then ultimately, I mean, I'm totally open about it. We want you on Remix. I think it provides a better UX and better DX all around. And so we're trying to make that path from V5 to 6 to 6.4 to Remix as smooth as possible. And of course, you can bail at any point too and be like, no, this is great. This is where I'm going to stop.
Okay, so maybe the spiciest question that I'll ask, is there an intention to just roll React Router into Remix entirely? Like, is that the long-term play?
Well, we just did it the other way, right?
So you just took the stuff out of Remix into React Router.
Yeah, and then we put it into React Router. Yeah, it went the other way. Anything that can be in React Router will go there.
Okay, and then and then React Router is kind of like the guts of Remix under the hood, right?
Yeah. Remix, we're doing the work right now to put it on top of Router 6.4. But Remix at this point, or at that point, will basically be a bundler that does all the code splitting and all that kind of stuff for you for good performance. And a server implementation, right? Your React Router app needs to talk to a server. And so Remix is that server. So it'll automatically server render. I mean, if we wanted to drive better adoption, the thing we run into is people are like, oh, Remix is so new, I don't know if we can use it. If we would have just named it React Router SSR, like, we could have done that. And then people probably wouldn't have thought, oh, it's brand new. It's like, no. This is just how you can. This is a new feature of React Router. You can serve. It's a server implementation. And that's essentially what it is at this point.
Sort of like it. Sort of make an analogy here and tell me if I'm off base. This is kind of like Remix is the Svelte kit to React Router Svelte, or like solid to solid start, where it's like this is the client side version, and then here's the full stack version that's got all the
You've got a lot of companies like GitHub. GitHub uses React, but they also use Rails. They server render with Rails, we want to provide value for organizations like that too with React Router. So it's like you can come whole hog with us with Remix, and like this is our opinion on a web app from soup to nuts, right? But we also have these composable parts. You can just use the React Router part and call out to Ruby to do the server render with it, and then put it in the client. Like, yeah, it's all these pieces where you can adopt as much of it or as little of it as you want.
Gotcha. Yeah,
we're even careful with the code. Yeah, sorry.
There's a phrase that I really like. That's the progressive disclosure of complexity. When you start talking about like tools and things,
disclosure
of complexity. So the
gotcha.
meaning of that would be like when you look at a tool like Remix, for example, you have kind of built the abstraction. You're saying like, this is how to build. This is where your pages go. This is how to handle a form submission. You know, you've kind of abstracted away all this stuff. But then if you want to do something fancy, if you want to like eject, right, then you can opt into more complexity by saying, all right, I'm going to use React Router as like my routing layer, and then I'm going to build my own backend. We've got Rails, we've got whatever. But you don't like, you don't have to opt out of the whole benefit to go to build something more complex for your whatever edge case you've got.
Yeah. My team doesn't want to or isn't allowed to run a server.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah, right.
I'm on a front end team. We don't get to have servers. We just got to throw static files on a CDN somewhere and then talk to the API that some other team builds. So
yeah,
you can get most of the benefits of Remix in that scenario with just React Router.
Yeah, and I think that's like what I like about it is that you know, like you said, it creates an on-ramp or an off-ramp depending on which way you're trying to go. Like we go build the proof of concept with Remix and everybody really likes it, and then IT is like, now we can't ship that. Like you need to do
we can't run Node here. We're not allowed to. You can only run whatever.
But then you can pull all of the benefits that you liked out, most of the benefits you liked out of Remix, and use the React Router implementation, and you know, then ship that on top of like whatever the approved backend stack is, and you're still like
and either
80%
you're going to
of the way
implement
there.
your own SSR, or you're just going to skip SSR, and then which is totally fine. Lots of internal tools. Who cares?
Yeah, of course.
And then you have to just do like a tiny little bit of glue to like talk to your backend API. And you're going to have to ship that to the browser. But that's it. It's generally the same thing as Remix at that point. You just have to glue in a couple of pieces yourself.
Nice. Okay, I get it. Yeah, I think that connects some dots for me, because when I was initially thinking about like when you said you'd pulled things out of Remix into React Router, I was like, the mental model wasn't working for me, because I was like, I don't get how a router and a framework are the same thing. But I like it. Thinking about it as an on-ramp makes a ton of sense, because really, if we look at what all of this software is doing, you know, what Next, what Svelte, what, you know, all they are providing the ability to define some routes, handle some data, put some stuff on the screen. Like that's really kind of where we're at, right? And so each one of these things handles a different link in the chain. And if I want to build a full SPA in vanilla React and that's all I'm using, I can do that. But I find myself building a lot of that tooling, a lot of that glue that holds the app together. If you opt into React Router, you're building less of the glue. You don't have to build your own routing solution, and now you don't have to build your own data loading. And then, you know, you go further to a Remix, a Next, a SvelteKit, or whatever, and now you've got like, well, we'll do the SSR for you as well, and we do the bundling, and we do the, you know, we can run this on a serverless function or an edge function or a node server or whatever you want.
Yeah, that's another big piece of Remix is it's an adapter for deploying your server anywhere.
Yeah, and so it kind of like you get to you can lead yourself down the path a little ways, and like you can make your life as hard as you want. You can go write the site in bytecode if you really want to, right? You probably shouldn't, but you can choose the layer of abstraction that you're comfortable with, and then opt into more as time goes on.
Like I'm using Supabase. Do I want to have a backend for my front end that talks to Supabase and do SSR and get all those benefits and UX benefits and stuff? Or would I rather not manage my own server, and do I just want to talk to Supabase straight from the browser?
Right.
So if you're in the first group, you would use Remix, and it's going to be your backend for your front end, or you can just have your own Postgres database and talk straight to it, right? But if you're in the other group that's like, I don't want to run a server at all, I just want to do this stuff from the browser, then you would just use React Router. But in general, you get the same feature development experience.
Yeah. Okay. So as you're looking at these tools, we talked about a couple, like why a team might make a call one way or the other. Do you find that there's kind of a sweet spot here where you're saying like this is when I would reach for React Router versus Remix or vice versa? Do you, or in your mind is it all kind of like, you know, the you should be at Remix, but you can go anywhere you want?
Uh, I think you get the best user experience with Remix. Remix has this unique ability to move lots of code over to the server. And there's lots of conversations about ways to do that. And I think that Remix does it in a really unique way with, as we'll see, loaders and actions. With React Router that we're going to see today, it all stays in the browser bundles. But in Remix, all of that code moves onto the server. Even stuff like sorting an array, right? I know that's not a lot of code, but that code doesn't have
It's
to
not
happen in your
nothing though.
component. Yeah, it's not, and multiplied over all of like every GraphQL thing you see always has this like flatten function that like takes a GraphQL thing and like flattens it, or parsing Markdown. Sometimes we ship that to the browser, and like that's a big library. Date libraries.
Yeah.
I know there's some constraints here, but if you know the server time offset and the user's preference, you can move the entire date libraries that you're using, stick all of that in a Remix loader and action. And none of that code goes to the browser. Your whole data abstractions, like I'm talking to the Shopify API or I'm talking to Supabase, you're going to build abstractions to talk to these things both for data loading and for mutations, right? Like form on submit, I'm going to go talk to my data layer. Because Remix does both data loading and data mutations, all that code can stay on the server, where if your framework only does the data loading and not mutations, all the mutation code has to go here. So on the server, you've got to connect to Supabase. And then in the browser, you also have to connect to Supabase.
Right.
And then you're going to try to figure out, well, how do I share code between this that works in both places? And Remix just has this unique ability of just like, that never goes to the client.
You know, that's actually something that it threw me when I first used Next.js, for example. I hit this weird edge case where I had something that was running in get static props, and I had something else that was running like in the use effect, and it was the same code. So I had this little utility that I'd written, and it would work, and then I moved it to a utility folder, and it wouldn't work because the framework had this like magic for server parsing and browser parsing, and it would sort of do these things. But because I didn't know that, because I didn't know the way that Webpack was configured and the magic parsing of the files and stuff like that, I managed to break working code, not based on the code that was written, but by like what file it was placed in. And, you know, this wasn't like API code. This was like, you know, it was like a little helper that included a node module that suddenly explodes if it's in this file versus this file. And that was something that
when your code's running in different environments, either to generate static pages, to run in a request response cycle, or strictly in the browser, like those are three very different environments.
Right.
And whatever API keys and whatever utility functions you got to figure out how do I get those in all three places. And you're going to run into that with Remix too. Like you bring in a module that worked, and then you try to use it in your component, and then it blows up because it only works on servers and not browsers. So I'm not going to pretend like we have escaped that.
And so and the way that gets escaped in these frameworks is by you have like a .server .client to isolate it to one environment as a file suffix. Is that right?
It's probably out of scope for this.
Sure. Okay. We don't have to talk about it.
But yeah, Remix can do that if you want to like force it, but we rely on tree shaking and modules not having side effects. So we basically just say, give me your route module, accept the loader in action, and that becomes the browser version of it. And then tree shaking will automatically be like, oh, you brought in this dependency. It's not used in the component. It was only in the loader, so it gets tree shaken out. So ours is lots. Next, there's benefits to the way that Next does it too that we don't have. They magically go and find, are you using it in which thing? And then they pull it out with Babel. But ours is just simply export these things. And if you used that in your component, well, sorry, it's going to blow up. But,
gotcha.
No, we could talk for 20 minutes about how all that works.
I'll stop asking about deep internals here.
From 5 minutes ago, like a way to make this decision: should I use Remix or should I use React Router alone? And how would a team make that decision? I think the best UX can come from Remix, and in a lot of ways, the best DX. But there's a lot more deployment complexity to shipping a Remix app than a React Router app with static files. If you don't control your backend, or you don't want to control your backend, you probably just want to do React Router. If you do have control of your backend, you can just skip the Rails API and all that stuff too. Like in Remix, you can just talk straight to your database.
Right.
You can talk straight to your GraphQL SDK. You don't have to make a fetch. And I think that leads to the best user experience, but it's at the cost of deployment complexity.
Yes. I think that's maybe a good gradient to draw it on, is like, you know, what do you control as a team? What do you know how to build also? Like, you know, if you've never done any backend deployment, like that can be a pretty steep hill to climb.
Users don't care about 500 milliseconds. Sometimes the Remix version is only going to get you a half a second faster. And users aren't going to care about that. So yeah.
Yeah.
Not a big deal to
so
enjoy.
You know, use your judgment, and if you've never done it before, consult this. We've got an amazing community. We've got, like, looking at the chat right now, we've got I think that's Nate from Astro, we've got Ryan from Solid. You know, we've got a great community out here that is very, very helpful. And one of the things that I've really loved about the especially lately, the web community, is just how collaborative it is. And it feels like all the frameworks are talking to each other, sharing ideas, actually like trading ideas back and forth. And we're seeing all of them actually improve as a result, which is really wonderful.
Yeah, it's a pretty healthy frenemy relationship. Some of my best friends today were on my rival soccer teams growing up.
Exactly.
Soccer is an interesting thing too, because it's a lot like web development, where like sometimes we're competing and other times we're collaborating.
Mm-hmm.
You get like the teams that like play against each other in their club league, but then like they're on the same team in the World Cup, and vice versa, right? So
yeah,
it's that kind of relationship. Sometimes we're in a match against each other, and then other times we're in a match together on our country's team.
You know, and I think that actually points to something really good, which is that, you know, competition is healthy. But that, like, there's a difference between competition and like antipathy. You know, like trying to take each other down doesn't do anybody any good, because eventually you're gonna have to work together. This industry is too small to think that you can just be like a
you're gonna end up working with somebody who you blocked on Twitter if that's how you're rolling in life.
But you know, if you're competitive, that's great. Because it pushes everybody forward, right? And so it's a tricky line to walk, but you know,
I get stuck in when people just keep poking me like, why don't you do SSG and Remix? And I'm like, I just don't even want to talk to you about it. Why don't you do SSG and Remix? I don't want to talk about it. Hey, why don't you do SSG? And I'm like, okay, here's what I think about SSG. What the heck? You're a jerk. And then I'm like, I will not ever talk about SSG ever again in my life. Anyway,
I mean, that's the adventure, right?
But
I love seeing everything that everybody's doing in all the other frameworks. Honestly, I don't look at it a whole lot. I just mostly hear about it from other people. Like, I'm not cruising the docs for Astro or anything like that. Like, I mostly just look at what tech we've got, and then I'm like, what do I want this to do? And then we make it do that. That's generally how we roll.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, so I'm seeing a couple reports of echo in the audio, which I think
that's my fault, probably.
Yeah, maybe if you want to tap your audio down just a bit, so I'm not doing the round trip.
I got you.
Okay, great.
And sorry once again, everybody. I'm in the middle of moving, and I thought I had headphones here, but I don't. Actually, I do. I have some without pads.
Oh no, that's going to be comfortable. All right, so while you're setting up headphones, I'm actually going to switch us over, because now I want to start playing with this, and I want to make sure we've got plenty of time. So I'm going to put us into the pair programming mode, and let's just do the first round of reminding everyone we have live captioning on this episode and every episode. That is made possible through the support of our hold on. First of all, Rachel is here today. Thank you, Rachel, for doing the captioning, and that's provided by White Coat Captioning. The sponsors make this possible. Netlify, NX, New Relic, and coming soon Pluralsight are all kicking in to make the show more accessible to more people, which I appreciate very much. We're talking to Ryan, who's been on the show before, so you can find this episode on Remix if you want to dig way more into Remix code, and then you can also find Ryan on Twitter at Ryan Florence. And for some reason,
Okay, I got you in my crappy headphones.
I have this fun bug that is happening where Twitter has decided that I'm on mobile and it won't let me not be on mobile. So I just have to load mobile Twitter now. Um, so anyways, all right. So I am going to go to the React router docs and then I'm going to let you take over. What should I do next? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Sorry, I was looking at the chat, which is why I don't usually have it up, because then I don't listen to you.
No worries. Yeah, so I'm now looking at the new React router docs, and I'm ready to rock.
Yeah, let's do this. I'm new, right? Are you new? Why don't you read those headings? Which one is you?
Let's see what's new in 6.4. I'm new. Primary features of React routings, loading and mutating data. Okay, I'm new to that. So why don't I click that button?
All about the user experience.
Hey, I know that guy. Let's see. So here's the tutorial. We'll be building a small but feature-rich app that lets you keep track of your contacts. All right, I get a contact. That's also a really good use of, like, you know, it's small and it's not brutal to build, which I
But there's
feel like
so many little details, like when
yeah.
you're searching, put a little spinner up, and like when you submit the form, now what? Yeah.
Got it.
How much time do we have?
We have about an hour. Call it
We have an
50
hour. Okay.
minutes.
I have this terrible habit from doing workshops for 5 years where I go on and on about the details of all the things that are happening. So I'm going to try to
Which is
keep
absolutely
that to a minimum today.
That is my my kryptonite too, because I love the rabbit holes. And so
yeah,
immediately
you had me talking about how we get server code out of client bundles.
I know.
I'm
sorry.
Never even have gone there.
Okay, so let's do React.
2 guys, 2 beards, 2 hoodies, and lots of tangents.
Infinite tangents.
An infinite tangent.
Okay, so I'm gonna wait. I meant to make that directory, and then I'm gonna go into it, and I'm gonna run this code, put it in here, and you wanted me to use a template, so grab this.
VConf is happening right now, right?
It's literally happening right now. I think it might be possible to watch me both on this stream and introducing the Edge section of VConf at exactly the same time, which I'm doing through quantum magic.
So. I guess it's 3 guys, 3 beards, and 3 hats.
I am indeed wearing a different hat, so that's yeah. I think I'm wearing a different hat at least. All right, so I have now a basic site. I'm going to open this up so we can take a peek at it. Looks pretty straightforward. Wait, let me do my get ignore catches this, so I'm going to get init, and then I'm going to open it, and it won't gray everything out. There it is. So we've got our app CSS, app JSX, our main.
Yeah, you can ignore it. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
We
so this
tell
is
you to delete all that.
Standard VDAP, right? Like we haven't done anything with React Router yet.
Yeah.
So now I need to install. We've got the React Router DOM, local forage. Now this is for data.
Yeah. So all the new APIs are all about basically CRUD, right? Like like I was saying before, form submissions have always been a part of routers on the web forever, right? App.post. And that's what all these features are about. So instead of like having some API that might go down or whatever for this tutorial, we just local forage is a nice little wrapper around browser storage, and it's actually going to store stuff in IndexedDB. And so that way we don't need a server or something to exercise the APIs.
Nice. And then I'm assuming these are utilities so that we don't have to write our own array sorting code.
Yeah, at the end of the tutorial we do a like search feature.
Got it. Okay, so I'm gonna
guess what? That's also a form submission.
Yes. Okay, so we got those going. My internet is behaving well today, so that's good. npm run dev, get this thing running, and open this up in a browser.
I wonder how much time they spent thinking about 5173. Is there like some secret back there?
I don't know. I'm actually always curious how people choose their ports. Because like, how did we land on 8888 as the default? You know?
I like 3000 because of Andre 3000 personally.
That's a good one. Okay. All right. So I now have my app up. It's a default Vite app, and we've got some pre-written CSS. Okay, fine. The chat's already making fun of me because I'm not. I love writing CSS, so I spend way too much time on it.
Don't do it.
Me to put
Just
this?
copy this.
You want me to put this in index.css?
Just copy it and then paste it into the index CSS.
Okay. And that'll give us
don't worry about it yet.
Yeah, some basics. Let me get back over here. We'll creating, reading, searching. So we've got some data model. Okay, and so this is stuff that we don't really care about for the router.
We want this. Yeah, just go paste it. Yeah. This is just right? Pretend like you got a backend team that built an API for you.
Mm-hmm. So we're gonna put this in source contacts. Okay, and so I'm just gonna trust the process here and not even read that code. And then
that's the point.
Yeah, we got a good team. We don't have to talk to them. So all we need in this first folder is contacts, main, and index.css, so we can get rid of everything else. Get out of here. Get out of here. Get out of here. All right. And then I'll just change this into a little buddy so it doesn't explode.
And then get rid of that import on line 3.
Yes. Okay. So now error-free.
Hi.
Backend in place. CSS is teed up for us. And
sometimes it takes a whole weekend of learning something new to get to that point.
For real. I mean, I remember like one of the, okay, 10-second tangent. I remember when I went to IBM, one of the things that was killer was we had all these ideas for ways that we wanted to innovate, but you would burn, if you got like 10% time, you would burn the whole 10% trying to scaffold the project and never actually got to experiment. So you had to have the willingness to like keep an idea across multiple quarters just to get the boilerplate up and running so that you could actually try the thing out. And that's one of the things that I feel like is such a game changer about, with Vite, Remix, like all these tools coming out that are like run a command and you're
off. Would you call it progressive disclosure?
Progressive disclosure, and just like really, really good defaults. Like somebody said it really well I think on the stream. They said make the right things easy and the hard things hard.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. That's something we live by at Remix. Like for example, if you do mutations in loaders, your app UI doesn't automatically reload and reflect that. And sometimes people are like, hey, how come this isn't like showing these changes? It's like, because the framework expects you to do stuff in an action, not in a loader like that, in order to get it to reload. Like, well, can't I just call a hook to get it to reload everything? It's like, yeah, hang on. If you're doing mutations in get and you have same site lacks cookies, you now have a security vulnerability.
Right.
And so like, we don't have to teach anybody that in Remix, but their app breaks when they do it wrong. And then when they do it right, they're just like, oh, the app works, but they don't know that they actually just closed the security hole as well. So yeah, make the right thing the easy thing and the wrong thing hard. I love that phrase.
Nikki is telling us in the chat that the 5173 is apparently Vite in Leet code, which is, I don't see it.
I imagine it's such a weird number. I imagine there was some sort of thought there. I love that. I mean, I can talk about the Remix logo for 20 minutes about like all the history in there of all the music stuff.
All right, so let's dive in and get a router going. So I've already installed the router, React Router DOM. So I'm going to, let me pull my code up and just collapse this on down and drop this over here so that we can see the code. And let's build some stuff. So in my main.jsx, I'm going to import a few things from React Router DOM. And I want the create browser router. I want router provider. And I want route. Okay. So now that I've got those, we have... Okay, so the router lives outside of the app as like its own const. So we got a router. Create my browser router.
React 18. We didn't think that you would like seeing a bunch of fetches go off and then get canceled and then go off a second time.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so this is our default element here. Good. And I need to make something... Oh, I closed this. There it is. What are you unhappy about? Oh, it needs to be an array, not a... Got it.
Yeah.
All right. My reading comprehension is poor, but we'll get there in the end. And then down here, we're going to router provider. Router equals router. And there is an app. We have done it. Okay, so this is straightforward. And I, like, as a... I don't know why, but like this is the way my brain works, and so this makes me happy. Like I like the idea of a object to kind of define things. I do like when you define routes in code and stuff. Like I think you can make that make sense in JSX, but like this, my brain likes this. This is pleasing to me.
Yeah. Well, and there's some constraints too why we want it out there, so you aren't like trying to set state and then change your routes, and it's like that doesn't work with data loading and everything else. Otherwise you're going to go anyway. You can still use the route JSX stuff if you want to. At the bottom of the tutorial you'll see that, but yeah, we I don't know, I think we're encouraging this way to do it. I personally still do the JSX stuff inside of there. But whatever, it doesn't matter, do one way or the other.
Okay. All right. So root route, we're going to do source routes and root. So let's get back in here and I'm going to do routes. Whoops. Routes root.jsx. Okay. And then this is going to be a default component. Okay. And I'm going to go ahead and copy paste this because it looks like a lot of code and nobody wants to watch me write HTML.
Yep.
So
and it's not really relevant to what we're doing too.
Yeah. So just at the high level, we're making a sidebar. So here's our contacts, a form,
a little search form,
and a little nav. Okay, that makes sense to me. And we're not using it yet, so nothing has happened. So now we need to actually import that. So let's go back over here. Root from root. Okay.
Some people call that the root.
Root.
I always feel bad that we did that to them.
And now we have, oh, look at that. Look at that CSS just kicking in for us.
Yeah. You can thank Jim Nielsen for that.
Thank you, Jim Nielsen, for saving the chat from watching me write CSS for 45 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I mean that's nice and straightforward. That gets us to where we want to go. And looking back at this code, now we have a router.
Now we can actually do something with it.
And this is super understandable. Like I think if anybody's written React before, we've got a component. The component looks like this. The component itself has no awareness of React router. It's just a component. And we're saying when you hit this endpoint, just a straight slash, show this component. Like this is, I think, why React router has such a strong hold on the industry. Is it's very clear. Show this component when this is true. It's very logical. You can explain it to anybody, and I think that makes it. It really makes things comprehensible.
It also has a name that makes you think that it's official. So
that's true. It does sound very official. All right, so let's get.
It's all about marketing when it comes to OSS, friends.
This is fair. Okay, so we broke it, and we broke it because I 404'd. So there is a contacts endpoint here. If I make this a little bit smaller, does it? We're good. Okay, Make this a little bit bigger so we can see the routes. How do I get y'all to go away? I want to be able to actually see our thing here. Go.
See the URL.
Yeah, I want to see the URLs. So we're at contacts 1. So this one here does what we want. This one breaks. This one also breaks. And that is because we're not handling... Oh, look at this contextual error. Providing your own error element. Look at it go. So you can provide a way better UX by providing an error element on the route. So that would mean...
Let's just keep going through the tutorial.
Okay. Oh, we're going to get an actual error page. All right, let's create an error page. And that lives in source. So we get error page.jsx. And this is going to give us use route error. And so this is just a hook that's going to source whatever the error from React Router is. Is that correct?
Yeah, so React Router is rendering your routes, loading your data, and handling your form submissions.
Mm-hmm.
So anytime you have an error that gets thrown there that you didn't catch yourself, we can catch it, and then we'll render an error boundary, and then this hook gives you whatever that thing that was thrown.
Got it. Okay. So this is kind of its own thing, and then we'll come back into the main. We will grab our error page. Error page.
As you're typing that out, one thing I love to do, and I've started doing in our tutorials, is to always deal with error handling early, because not only is it good for users to see what's wrong, but like you're gonna screw up your code and you're gonna see errors. So it's good to get that done up front, because then it's going to speed up the rest of your development.
Mm-hmm. And look, it's like automatic. We're already there, right? This is significantly better than what we were getting before, where it was kind of just giving us a mess. And now when we click through, it's like, hey, you didn't implement that yet, right?
So here's a little interesting nuance. React Router. Too many RE words. Can you imagine if like your name was Remy and you're involved with React with all these things? But anyway, if the thrown thing, if whatever got thrown while you were loading or rendering or whatever, is a web fetch response,
mm-hmm.
Kind of sounds weird that React Router uses responses, but it's part of the DOM API.
Mm-hmm.
That status text is going to be pulled from there, and that's why it said not found on our error page. That's just like a server, right? You have your status text. And those ideas are now in React Router, the idea of requests and responses and everything else, because that's what they represent. But we'll get more into that a little bit later in the tutorial.
Got it. Yeah. Nikki, I don't think I understand your question about the capital letters. The error page doesn't have it's still a component. So if I'm misunderstanding your question, can you rephrase it, please? And then there's a question from, I'm so sorry, I'm not even going to attempt to say your name. If the browser is defined statically outside of the components, how would you make the / direct to the landing page when logged out and then direct to your default logged in view when logged in? I have a feeling we're going to be able to touch on conditional routing throughout the tutorial. Is that
your loaders, we'll get to loaders, but we even have a redirect function now too. So your loader will see them. Are they logged in? Yes or no? If yes, just keep going. If no, redirect them to some other page.
Great.
Or it's just data. It's just data where you're like, do I have a user or not? And then your component can decide what to render.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, great. So
but it's all very server feeling now in React Router. It's like you got to think like the backend team.
Yeah, for sure. And that, yeah, I'm not going to get on this tangent because
Yeah, keep going. We haven't even gotten started.
So we've got the contact route API, and this is going to give us a form. So we have the actual contact. It's going to show an avatar, their name, favorite contact. We'll dig into what that is. And then we have
it's
Twitter,
like a star,
if they have
like
a Twitter.
Mark them as favorite.
Oh, got it. Then we've got notes about them, and then a form to edit or delete. with a confirm built in. Okay, great, cool. And then the favorite is the star. All right, cool. So I'm gonna grab all of this.
We should add a copy button on those things.
Get a contact.jsx. Drop all this in. Nothing up my sleeve. And now we have a contact thing. And then I'm assuming the next step is going to be actually having this render. Yep. So we go back to here.
So this is the kind of stuff where with Remix, you're not going to have to wire up. You don't have to make a route config. You don't have to wire up these files to your routes. It just happens.
Right. So then we get in here and we say the path is going to be contacts. And then this, for anybody who's never seen this before, do you want to talk through what that is while I get the rest of this written in?
We call it a dynamic segment. So that it's just a placeholder. So like different values, like their ID can go in the URL and it'll match. We'll parse it out and we'll pass it to different APIs like loaders and use params and stuff like that.
Yeah, awesome. All right, so that way when we do the contact/1, contact/2, this just gets caught. And then are we already using that? We're not yet. Okay. So we'll get our fallback component here. And we go back.
What do you mean fallback? Yeah, here you go. Boink.
Well, because these are like the fallback values, right? Like if there's not a name, use your name and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So we're in a contact now. We've got an actual contact, but it's not pulling based on the who it is. It's just the right. Okay. So next up. Oh, nested route. Okay. All right. Let's do nested routes because that obviously that makes sense. We want this to show up.
Yeah, I want to keep that sidebar up while I'm navigating around. So we'll see how do you do that with React Router.
Okay. Oh, cool. Okay. All right. This makes sense. So we go in and instead of making it its own route, we're going to take this piece and put it inside here.
Yep. And this is an array, just in case you forgot.
Got it. Okay. So now, did I miss a step?
Or go back. Do you have a slash on there?
I do not have a slash on there.
Go in your... get rid of that slash on the path. It should work, but maybe we have a bug on line 16.
Oh, here. Got it.
Yeah, that shouldn't matter. Oh, never mind. Read the next part of the tutorial.
A blank page to the right. Look at us go. We forgot to add an outlet. Okay, so we need... Good. All right, so we're going into our root component here. And I'm going to import the outlet from React Router DOM. And then we're going to put that in the detail, right? Yes. And so this...
Boom.
This is a cool thing. Like I've seen slots and React Children has kind of always been one of these. And what I like about like outlets and stuff like that is that it feels like something about it in my brain just is comfortable with that idea of like, oh, I've written something and this is my placeholder where it's like, I know how variables work. This is my variable for like whatever the sub route is. And it's just sticking a component in
React
there.
Router figured out what the heck is supposed to go in the outlet and then you get to decide where it goes.
Yeah, and it just
you don't have to worry about what it is.
Exactly. And I feel like I've done a lot of work on like trying to catch the render partially and like stop this subtree from rendering so that I can stick this thing in there. And it's a lot of like, it's complexity that usually causes me to give up. I just, you know what, this UI is not that important. Let's just like re-render the whole thing. It's fine. And so
it doesn't re-render the whole thing. That's why it's cool with React. React only is changing that one part of the page.
Well, that's what I mean. Like this makes the right thing easy because you just do it and it just works. You don't have to go in and manually escape all of these render loops and things to make this function. And I think that is really, really cool.
And no layout code, no like repeating like, oh, I'm going to put this same root layout around every single one of my pages. It's like you just made the root once and then we pop something inside of there.
That's definitely, yeah, I've struggled a little bit with that, where like, you know, the people talk about the provider pyramid. I've ended up with like the wrapper element pyramid, where where I have like my root layout, my sub layout, my sub layout.
Yeah, React Router just does that for you. It's in your route config.
Yeah, it's nice. It's nice. All right, let's do some client-side routing. So we're going to now add the link component, which comes in the same place as outlet. And then we're just gonna, I assume, update these to be links. Is that right? Yes.
Yeah, change them to link to. So this is so what's interesting is like we've been clicking those links, but we weren't actually using client-side routing. Right? That was going to the Vite server, and then Vite was saying, okay, let's just run this whole page again, right? So we weren't using client-side routing yet. We were actually making full document requests.
Yeah. And something that is important to note about the Vite server is that it's smart enough to do like the catch-all route and redirect to the root.
Yeah, everything goes to the main page.
Because otherwise what'll happen is you'll build this and you'll think this is working great, and then you'll deploy it and it'll all break because you aren't actually redirecting all of your traffic back to the root page. But it's very nice that Vite does that for you.
Yeah.
So now if I refresh the page, we are no longer doing any reloads. We're just getting
we're doing the client-side routing.
Yeah. Okay. So that'll make more sense when we actually put real data in here, but it's still nice to see. So let's load some actual data.
Yeah.
So URL segments.
6.4 comes in.
Okay. So contacts ID, right?
Yeah, so the idea here is that each segment of the URL almost always corresponds to data.
Yes.
And the data that you need almost always corresponds to a layout. So like 90, 95, 99%, I haven't run the statistics or collected the data, but the vast majority of the time when you have data in an app, the URL told you what it was, and some portion of that URL is coupled to some layout. And so this is the really big convention of React Router and data loading, is we can just now say, all right, we've already got our nested routes that are URL segments. So far we just have slash, then we have contacts ID. Those are 2 segments, 2 nested layouts. And now we can couple data at each one of those levels and then let React Router just deal with it.
Is this right? Did I do this wrong? Contact? I think I typoed that file name, but it's okay. No, I didn't. I need to go up a level. That's what's wrong.
Yeah.
Okay. Contacts. There it is. All right. So now I've got
somebody
contacts.
asked, can you handle focus with the outlet? We are, this is a long conversation, but in order to do scroll restoration and focus correctly, you got to know data. That's why we haven't had this stuff in React Router before. But we are scheduling the work soon to give you hooks to manage focus on route changes, which should be pretty awesome.
Nice.
But we don't have it yet.
So I'm seeing a loader, which is a thing that I first saw in Remix, and I had assumed that you had to do some kind of like magic parsing with loaders to make them function. So how is this different from?
This is just all go into the browser. Like this is all in. This is what makes Remix unique from React Router. Remix can pull these loaders and actions out of the client bundles and leave all that code up on the server.
Got it. Okay, and then we're Router, just importing it directly.
Yeah.
Got it. Yeah. I understand. Okay, so back to here, then we have this, and then we get loader as root loader. And then down here, we're going to configure the loader.
Yeah, so now we say, all right, this route has a path, it has an element, has an error element, and then it's got some data with this loader. And we just couple them all, and then React Router will do the rest.
And then to get it, we've got a hook. All right, hooks make sense to me. I can use those. We're going to go over here.
Hooks don't make sense to everybody.
So we've got our contacts, and then it's going to be an equals, not a from, and I'm going to use the loader data. Okay.
Before anyone asks, no, we haven't made the types great there yet. It just returns an unknown. So we will get there.
So then in our nav, we're going to loop. So contacts, map, we get out of contact. And that is going to return some elements. So we know that, oh, I need to do a check first if we have any. So contacts length.
Oh, yeah.
And then I'll take this off. We'll move this piece up. We'll move this over. This is going to go in here. And then I need to group it down here. Okay, delete this one.
If this doesn't work, we'll just go copy paste it.
Yes, exactly. And then what we've got in here is we've got a key of our contact. Then we're going to link to the contact and their actual ID.
Just so you know, the Slyox, we started on Remix before SvelteKit existed. So maybe you're smelling Remix when you're looking at SvelteKit.
Let's go first, contact last, and then we can just drop in our contact first.
They both smell great. It's like hamburgers and tacos. You can't go wrong.
That is a fact. I saw on the internet a absolutely cursed food item yesterday. It was a
pickle cheesecake.
Pickle cheesecake. Who does this?
Your burger has a pickle and cheese on it, so
I know it's like it should be right, but it's very much not right. I'm doing this right. Okay, and then I'm just gonna drop in the rest of these. Okay.
I think when people see that React Router has a form component, they think it's a pickle cheesecake. So maybe it is, and maybe it's delicious.
What thing? I missed a thing.
Did you get it?
Okay, I'm bailing.
Yeah.
Oh, there's another another conditional that I didn't grab. So okay, we're just bailing. Copy pasting, and now we have no contacts.
Yep.
Which makes sense because we didn't have any contacts because we haven't added any yet. Because there's, I believe if I saw that code was like looking at local storage, we haven't created anything. So why would there be anything there?
Yeah.
Okay. And because I'm now got to get back on this route. So no contacts. So next we want to, we won't create our first contact. Let's talk about HTML.
We can skip that part.
Okay, we're skipping.
You should go read it later, though. The point is, browsers know how to serialize a form. We kind of talked about it before, and then make a request. I guess I can cover it real quick. So a client-side router, what does it do? You click a link. It prevents the browser from doing its default thing and making a request to the server. Same thing with forms now in React Router. When you submit a form, we prevent the default thing, then we create a request and send it to an action. And we basically completely emulate what the browser is doing so that you can create an SPI experience. The reason to do this is because if you just rely on browser behavior, HTTP, HTML, and a server, the best UX you can get, which is a good one, is a spinning favicon. That's it, right? You submit a form, spinning favicon, next page. So the whole point of bringing in an SPA router like this is to create a more interesting experience than that. So that's what that section was talking about.
Got it. Okay, so I'm going to I've imported my form, and I just changed this from being like a lowercase f form to being a Remix router form, and now I'm exporting an action, and my action is going to await create contact. How does this?
It's just going to make a blank one right now.
Oh, blank. Okay, I got it.
We're just learning the plumbing between a form and action.
Got it. So then we come back here. We're going to get our, let me click. There we go. We're going to get our action as root action. And then we can come down here and actually use it. So here's our action. All right. And now we can click. So here is my new.
Boom.
And it gave us a note. It gave us a blankie.
Yeah, click it again.
And on it goes.
Okay, so what's happening is it's serializing our form, which has nothing in it, and then sending it over to the action, calling the action, and then calling the loaders again to get the data, and then re-rendering the page. Like, look at the code you just wrote, right? You made an action and you wrote a form.
Right.
You didn't tell it to revalidate all the data. You didn't grab some context object and say like, hey, here's my new user, or like go up to the list component and be like, hey, here they are. Like there's no step 3, right? It's step 1, make a form. Step 2, the business logic to actually create the thing, the actual like app specific stuff. And then React Router connects it all together, submits it, calls all the functions, and then revalidates everything for you. You're not going to see it down there because it's all local storage.
It's all
Remix, you would
local
see
storage.
some requests.
So, right, because we're doing it on this side with the actions, it's all client side.
Yeah, everything's in the client.
And because it's local storage, there's no request because we just use JavaScript to write directly to. Okay, so yeah, that makes sense.
You're
that
not
makes
gonna
sense.
see anything in there. All right.
Cool. All right, onward. So now we've got the ability to create infinite blank contacts. I have all sorts of friends and no information about them. So creates an empty contact. It looks like this is what you just told me. So URL params in loaders. So we want to click on the no name record, and it gives us our wacky ID. Good. Real ID for the record. And reviewing that makes sense. Okay. So the next thing that we want to do is we're going to, here we go. Now we're going to actually use this data. So in our contact,
we're going to get the real data.
We are going to include use loader data. And then down here, we're going to import get contact from contacts. Oh, and it was smart enough to know that. Thank you, computer. Then we can do our loader, and I'm going to copy paste this because we've already done it before. With one exception here. So this,
that's new.
This is the piece that gets called, because we register. Oh, we haven't registered it yet, but when we do,
Down there on line 21. Line 21, we've got that dynamic segment contact ID, and in the URL we got that like slug for them.
Right.
And so when the loader gets called, React Router parses that out and then passes it to you on params dot, and then whatever you named it, contact ID.
Yeah. Okay. So gives us params and then params contact ID. That makes sense. And then we're going to actually use the loader data in here and get rid of our dummy contact. So now we've got our loader data. And nothing else changes because this was all built against the same data model, right?
Yeah, same. Yeah.
So it doesn't like, what have I done here? What did I miss?
Cannot read properties undefined of reading avatar. We haven't hooked up the loader to the route.
Oh, you're right. You're right. So we need to import the loader as contact loader over in main.jsx.
Isn't that cool though? It caught our render error and put in it our own custom element.
That is nice. And
that's what the user will see when your API sends back something you didn't expect. They're going to see that kind of a message.
Okay, so now we want a loader, and we'll do a contact loader. Save, and now it works. Aha. All right. Updating data.
That's it. No use effect. No state you managed yourself. You just said, give me the contact.
Okay. So next we want to actually put some data in here, which is good. So let's do this edit route. So routes, edit.jsx. I'm going to, let's see, it's a form,
nothing new here.
First name, last name. Yeah, let's copy paste. What have I just done? Hold on.
Whoa.
I think something is touching my, hello? Oh, that was weird. It was like I had a ghost finger on my touchpad there, and it would.
Oh yeah, I hate that.
Okay.
It's always my palm because these things are so huge now. Like this part of my hand will like.
Yeah. I need elbow like rejection on my trackpad, Apple.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got our edit here, and then I can bring this in. Okay, so let's just I'll just copy paste this one in as well. So this is going to be the whatever the contact ID is /edit, and that's going to go in as a child route of our main route. And it also uses the contact loader.
Yeah, don't take that super seriously. Some people go through this tutorial and they're like, oh, so am I trying to share loaders? And it's like, no. I was lazy when I made the tutorial.
Okay, so that's in here, and then I need to go into the main.jsx. We're going to throw this one in here. I'm going to let Prettier deal with that, and then I need to import my edit contact from routes edit. Good, thank you. Okay, so now if I click this, does it just work? We want it to be rendered in the root routes outlet. So we made it a sibling to the existing child route. And so if I just click this, it does the thing. It does the thing. Wonderful. Yeah. Absolutely wonderful. Okay.
You want to know what's kind of interesting? That was a button. Just go look at the markup for that button.
Yeah, I saw that. It was in the contact page. We've got
form action equals edit. So link or anchors, ahref, and form action are actually like the same component. Like they're the same thing. Action is the same as href.
Mm-hmm.
So if you submit a form that doesn't have a post method on it, it does the exact same thing in the browser that a link would do. It just changes the URL. And so React Router emulates that as well. We're in a form, we had a button there, and then we go there. Would I make this edit link a button? Probably not, because they have different keyboard events and things like that. Like you can't right click and open in a new window, those kinds of things with a button inside of a form. But maybe you want that. Maybe you don't want them to open it in a new one, in a different tab that way.
Yeah.
But anyway, I just put that in there just as like, isn't this interesting? Links and forms are actually like, this is why React Router is involved with forms, because forms, since the dawn of the form element, are navigation, are a navigation API and always have been. They changed the URL. So that's why we're involved with this as React Router.
Yeah. All right. Awesome. Okay. So let's get into redirects. All right. So we're going to update this contact with form data. So we've got this update contact here and an action that will get the form data. That's all. That's nice, because this is just built into the. Is this just built into the browser, or are you running form data on it?
Well, there's a lot going on here. I'm going to start at the beginning. So without JavaScript, without React Router, when you submit a form, we've already covered this, the browser is going to serialize that form into form data, which is a DOM API. And it's going to send that off to a server. Maybe you're more familiar with different server-side APIs to represent that form data. But in the browser, that's part of the fetch API, and that's on request.formData. You could go to the MDN docs and you can see request.formData is a browser API. So what React Router is doing as a client-side router that handles form submissions is it's saying, okay, a form on submit, we prevent default. And the question is have you ever asked yourself, what am I preventing here? Like all of us have written form on submit, event prevent default. And most of us haven't sat back and been like, what did I just prevent? You prevented the browser from serializing the form, making a request, and sending it to the server. So React Router prevents the event, serializes the form, creates a request, and then sends it to your action instead of to your server. But if it went to a server, the server is going to have a router, and it's going to match it, and it's going to send that request to that handler. The same with React Router. It's going to match whatever form action it is, send it to your action on the route, and then re-render everything when it's done. So kind of, you might look at that and be like, what is going on here? Why do I have a request here? That's what we prevented. So we're going to emulate what the browser would have done and hand it to you.
Got it. Okay, so, and that leads to us getting the form data. We figure out what's changed, and then we update our current contact ID, which we're getting out of the params, with whatever's changed, and then redirect to that contact ID. So that's the whole thing, isn't it? Like if I save this, it just works. I have to do the action. Okay, so on to the main.jsx, and we're going to get our action out. edit action, and then toss this on in here. Double check my work against the tutorial. Good, I've done it. Fill out this form, and now we can set a thing. Okay, great. So why don't we just put you in here? And I can go over here and...
This is where we all get everybody's avatars.
Truly.
If they ever put that into like a div background or something, I'm gonna be so mad.
Yeah, absolutely hosed. All right. So there we go. We've got this, and then yeah, I can add some notes and really
did you notice the sidebar? Loves SSG. I do, when it's generated by cache control on edge servers around the world.
Oh yeah, and this is
upset. Go add go to one of those other no names and just throw a name in there and hit save. Okay. And like, show me in the code where you're updating that sidebar. I love how you're just stuck on mobile forever.
Yeah, I don't know why I don't get it. Oh no, image link.
Also looks.
Okay.
Nice.
So I've saved.
Okay. Boom. Over there on the side.
There it is.
So I think this is so cool about Remix and React Router now. So what's happening is React Router knows that a form submission pretty much always means you're going to change data.
Mm-hmm.
So if you change data, we probably want to go revalidate it from whatever our data source is. And since we have a convention of loaders that says, here's where data comes from, we can just call the loaders again after a form submission.
Yep.
And so that's why that sidebar automatically updates. We know just by the semantics of a form submission that when this form submission is done, when your action completes, we should recall all the data on the page to get it to show up.
Yeah.
And so it just makes for an awesome default experience of like, you just do the thing you got to do. Make a form, write an action that actually changes the data, and you don't do anything else to get the UI to update.
Yeah, it's extremely cool. And then we redirect. So we want to redirecting new records to the edit page. Okay. I kind of want to, we're looking at like probably another like 10 minutes tops. So I kind of want to jump ahead to the loading states. Can we do that safely?
Do it.
Okay. I'm going to skip active link styling because I feel like that one, people will be able to figure out. Pending UI, that feels like the thing I'm really interested in. Is that right?
So this is why we do single page applications. Like, this is why the spinning favicon is great, but the whole reason we made this whole JavaScript mess over the last 5 years is this part.
Loading spinners.
Loading spinners. Hopefully you can do better than just a bunch of loading spinners. But that was the goal.
All right, so we're going to do our navigation is going to be use navigation. And in here, we can do something like we're on the detail div. Let's go detail div, and we'll add a class name. And that is going to be...
the question from the Slyox. When you're navigating around, React Router, it's so hard for me to keep my children's names straight. React Router knows which layouts are actually changing. So if we're just switching contacts, it's not going to recall the sidebar menu. It's not going to call that loader. It's only going to call the loader for the changing routes. But after a form submission, it just calls all of the loaders because we don't know where you may have read that data from. That's not knowledge that React Router has. If you know that and you're like, oh, I don't want the sidebar to update, or I don't want this other thing, this other parent route to update, there's an API to bail out of it called should revalidate, and you can just return false out of that. And based on it gives you some args to figure out, should I revalidate or not? But yeah, you can bail on that behavior on a route by route basis. All right, so reload, because I got a little cache there. Yeah, now we're fading.
Nice. I mean, real, like, very low pain, which is it's just so nice to have like this little bit. And the only thing that changed to run through this code is because we grab the navigation gives us a current state. If the state is loading, we're adding a loading class, which causes the fade. So the work of like the animation stuff is happening in the CSS, which I've been told I'm not allowed to touch. So you know, we're relying on the classes here to do this work for us. So I mean, this is so dang cool. And then it looks like for destroy, we're gonna get the same thing. We'll
Yep.
just run another form submission that causes this to happen. Yeah.
Yeah, it's always 3 steps: write an action, write a form, and then wire up the route.
Yeah. And
over and over and over.
And then did you see there was a question about where was it? What about dynamic forms like show field XYZ when the list of that name? So when we're doing that, we're just into like logic, right? And as long as you're updating form elements, you're still whatever submits is going to be form data. Is that correct?
Yeah. So it's going to get a little bit more interesting, and we have this thing called use fetcher, which is a hook that's like so far everything we've done are like these full singleton navigation events. They're changing the URL. It's the whole app that's going somewhere. The whole app is submitting a form, and you can read the data that's being submitted too, so that you can do like optimistic UI or like just say that, hey, we're submitting a new contact named Ryan. Like you know that stuff as it's happening, and I found that that's like almost enough. And then we have these fetchers that are like their own little mini navigation. But they still talk to the routes, so they aren't changing the URL, but they're just and the bottom of the tutorial does it with the favorite button. I don't know if we have enough time to do that, but we could do the favorite button down there.
Cancel button.
Yeah, get submissions, that's the search. We don't need to do that. Yada yada yada.
Submitting forms on change, adding a search spinner. I'm just gonna do
no, keep going. Do use fetch. Yeah, here we go. Yeah, scroll up from there.
Okay.
Oh no, that's the very top.
What was it? Use fetch.
Type. Yeah, use fetcher. Here we go. Mutations without navigation. So, and loading. They can do data loading too. So to answer the question, you could wire up some events to like an on change of an input, and then interact with a fetcher, which would be fetcher.load to go get some data from one of your routes. And then it manages all the state, manages the whole transition of that thing, manages errors. If the errors happen, it bubbles those up to, so an error in your loader as you're trying to get like, let's take an example. You pick your city, or you pick your state. Yes, I don't know. You pick your state, and then it lists a bunch of cities, right? That's kind of what these forms sometimes do. So you can do on change on the state. And then you'd call fetcher load, and then that fetcher is going to have some state, talk to the route, and then you could use that data to then render the rest of the form. And then once that thing is populated, you submit the form, and it's just now we're back to like the singleton submission navigation thing, right? So, and all of it is routes. Like you're always, especially if you have a server, that's an API route. So
right,
we keep that model the whole time.
Awesome. I mean, okay, so we're roughly at time here, so let's spend. I have one more question that came in that I thought was a good one. Is would there be some kind of like star as route magic possible in the future? Which as soon as I read that, I was like, remix. Like that's star as route, right? Because it's when you set up remix, you're getting the actions and the loaders and all that automatic configuration without having to.
I think what I would do is I would make a Vite or Webpack plugin just for a file system convention. And then just have that generate the route config for you. So like you never import any of it. You just have a routes folder, and then your entry point gets generated automatically. That's where I would go. But yeah, you could do a route star thing on there. You won't get the element, but you get loader in action and stuff like that.
Got it.
Yeah, those conventions are what makes remix.
Cool. All right.
So someone's asking, can you cache loader functions, return values like React Query? React Router is just about what is on the page. React Query is about caching over the history of a whole session. So they work together really well. And we have a doc all about it. If you want to go to our docs website, and on the left side it says I can't remember what the title is, but it's all the way at the bottom under guides. Data library integration.
There we go.
Yeah, that one.
Yeah. So lots and lots of good stuff here. So I'm going to toss in the tutorial because this tutorial is great. Where else should people go if they want to dig in? Are there specific examples you want them to look at, migration guides, anything like that?
Man, it was just a big effort to get all this over here. So we don't have a whole lot of, we didn't touch on skeleton UI, deferred data right there. Maybe the feature overview. Go up to, we got to give the people what you promised. Scroll all the way to the top of the docs.
All the way to the top of the docs.
All the way to the top of the docs and click on feature. Now do a find for skeleton UI. I'm going to put a table of contents on these pages, but I just didn't. Here we go. Yeah, so you can actually use suspense here. So what happens is in your loader, you can say defer, and then that puts it into suspense mode. Because right now, when you navigate, we block the next screen on the loader.
Okay.
Right? Like we got to wait for all that stuff to come before the next screen shows up. And that's why we brought in use transition and we fade out the page so you know something's happening. Otherwise, the app feels super clunky. But sometimes you want to like say, hey, I just want to go straight to the next page and show skeletons. Or I want to wait for one or two things, but not the rest, and show a skeleton for those. So that's where defer comes in. So you say defer, issue comments history. And in this case, the issue is important. Now scroll up just above the defer. Look how we await the issue, but the comments in history are just the promises that get returned.
Got it.
So you hand promises or values to defer, and those promises, we know, oh, that's a promise. We're not going to wait for that.
Right.
But we will wait for the issue.
So don't show me anything until the issue's ready, because the issue is critical. You can't do anything without that. Main thing. But like comments, they don't matter. Like they're useful, but they're not critical for the first view.
Yeah, and we could defer all of it if we wanted to. Now you scroll down and we have just a plain old suspense with a skeleton UI. That's how you get the skeleton UI. Just put a skeleton in there. And then the await component comes from React Router, and you're saying, I want to resolve the history of this issue. That's the promise we're going to wait for. And then we have a render callback right there if you don't want the indirection of another component. And then you can render your that thing. So React Router is going to immediately transition as soon as the issue is done, render the skeleton for the issue, and render the skeleton for the comments, unless those made it in time. If the history and the comments made it in the same amount of time that we were fetching the issue, then we won't get any skeletons. And they'll all show up together.
But as it is spooky season, we want maximum skeletons. So make sure that you add a timeout on all of your fetch calls.
But yeah, so you can this is my best experience. Sorry, I just hit my mic. This is personally my best experience I've ever had with suspense. At this point, I'm like, yeah, suspense is really cool and exciting. And but for me, it needed this defer thing to be able to say, here's the data I care about, here's the data I don't, and then a router to orchestrate it for me.
Yeah, I think that really totally makes sense. All right, so I got to cut us there because we are out of time, but make sure you go and check this stuff out because it is extremely cool. This will all be available in the show notes. Make sure you go and follow Ryan on Twitter for all sorts of good information. And this episode, like every episode, has been live captioned. We have had Rachel with us today from White Coat Captioning. Thank you very much, Rachel. And that's made possible through the support of our sponsors. We've got Netlify, NX, New Relic, and Pluralsight all kicking in to make this show more accessible to more people. While you're checking out things on the site, you can go and look at the schedule. We've got so much good stuff coming up. We're going to play with WebAuthn on the web and a whole bunch of other things, including some stuff that I haven't had time to get up on the site yet. So make sure you go, like the show on, follow on Twitch, subscribe on YouTube, do all the things that tell the algorithms to show this stuff to people. And with that, we're going to go find somebody to raid. Ryan, thank you so much for spending some time with us today. This was awesome.
Thank you. I always have a blast here.
All right, y'all. We will catch you next time. Take care.